Welcome to Reddit Corner. Today, we return with another strange tale from r/Humanoid Encounters, where a sheriff's deputy on a routine patrol of the countryside encounters a strange entity and chases it into an abandoned apple orchard. Later, the deputy's partner also spots the creature and shows the deputy the disturbing evidence it left behind. We hope you enjoy this one. I was told to post this here, as y'all might be able to add some perspective to this. As a cop, I spend a lot of time dealing with things that scare people, things they can't or don't want to try and explain. I'm usually the person that gets the call to go check out things that might go bump in the night. Add in the fact I usually work alone, in the middle of nowhere. I've run across and seen some things that I can't rightly explain. This was probably the first time in my career I had been in a supernatural situation. It had happened before in life, but cop-wise, this was the starting point of what had turned out to be a very interesting career. One night, on the tail end of July, I was cruising back country roads, trying to find some kind of trouble to get into. As the only deputy out in the county that night, I had been busy up to a point. Then the calls had slacked off around midnight. I hadn't seen a single soul for the last few hours, and decided I would try and be proactive for a bit. The night was hot. I had the window rolled down, headlights off, driving by the light of the full moon, hoping to sneak up on anyone I could find that would be out breaking the law. I had been driving for a few hours straight, with no luck at finding anything. The only thing I had scared up was a few rabbits and a fox. I decided to stop, stretch my legs, and answer nature's calling. I pulled to a stop in a particularly empty part of the county. I had driven the road a few times. It was mostly old, abandoned farmhouses and barns. No one lived in the area, and it made for a good target for thieves trying to steal copper or whatever they could get their hands on. The left side of the road was nothing but cornfields as far as you could see. It was getting close to harvest time. The stalks were close to 7 or 8 feet tall, and just a sea of green. On the right side of the truck was an old, abandoned apple orchard. I never did get the full story of how the land came to be abandoned. It had something to do with multiple mistresses, multiple wills, illegitimate children, and other nonsense, the result of which was 150 acres of fruit trees that had become its own little forest over the 20 or so years it had been unattended. I was sitting in the truck, head laid back, just enjoying my little break. I had closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, I looked out into the cornfield and made direct eye contact with something. At first, I thought it was a person and almost gave me a heart attack right there. The thing stood about 7 feet tall. Its eyes were human, but they shone in the night like animal eyes. I'm not a weak man. I've done more stupid and foolish things in my time than I care to remember. I've been afraid before, and I'm not above admitting it. There was something about those eyes that absolutely terrified me, though. So, I did what any normal, insane 22-year-old dumb kid would do, and I chased it. I kept eye contact with the thing. I slowly rolled up my window, and without breaking our staring contest, I checked out with dispatch over the radio and grabbed my patrol rifle off its mount above me. I remember taking a deep breath and then throwing the door open and jumping out of the truck yelling, "Sheriff's office!" in the most authoritative voice I could muster. I maintained eye contact for the entire time, except right as my vision crossed the A-pillar on the driver's side. As soon as my boots touched the dirt of the road, the creature was gone. I caught nothing but a blur as a black and brown shape vaulted across the road and ran into the trees. Once again, I let my sense of self-invincibility get the better of me. I kicked the door closed on the truck and took off after it, yelling for it to stop. I stumbled into the forest and was hit with the most overpowering smell. It was a combination of unwashed person, body odor, and animal musk. I still remember the smell vividly all these years later. I've been around rotting bodies that didn't impact me as much as that smell. I've never been a particularly fast runner. I've not ever cared much for it, and always been more of a short burst kind of guy. Whatever I was going after was fast, though. It didn't dawn on me until much later that it was probably just playing with me, leading me further into its miniature forest. I would catch a black blur moving off in the distance. I'd hear a branch break, or a sound off to the side. I stumbled around like this for a good 15 minutes before my bravado and adrenaline wore off, and I decided I should head back to the truck, because I was alone and scared at this point. The whole way back, I had that itch between my shoulder blades that I was being watched, like I was an intruder in someone else's domain. I made it out of the trees and back to the truck. It was in the same place I had left it, but the driver's side door was open, the dome light on, vehicle turned off with the key still in the ignition. I knew I hadn't locked the door, but I know I had left it running. I didn't often turn it off during my shift. I checked the truck, making sure it was empty. That same smell filled the cab of the truck. It was in the seats and carpets, like someone had sat in my seat and just wallowed around in it. I started the truck and got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't tell anyone about that encounter. I just told dispatch I thought I had seen something, that it turned out to be nothing, and left it at that. Around a year later, during one of the few times I rotated to days and had a partner to work with, I was driving around on the opposite side of the county. I had just cleared a cattle call, playing cowboy, pushing some steers back into a fence, when my partner called me, wanting to know where I was. He was scared, and I could hear it in his voice. I let him know where I was, and he asked if I could meet him down on the southwest part of the county. There was an old gin down there. It just happened to be in the same general area of my encounter about a year prior. I had never told him about it, but I agreed to meet him. The story I got from him was he had pulled into the same cornfield from a year earlier, not too far from where my story took place. He had backed into it down a turn row that was used to maintain the pivot. He decided to stop there to get a few minutes of rest. It was a Sunday morning. Like most of our Sundays, nothing would really happen until after lunch when people started to get active. My partner had dozed off for a few minutes and had been woken by his truck violently being shook back and forth with a dust cloud dissipating around him. His first thought was it was just me messing with him. When he got out to check, he told me he smelled a nasty animal smell. Not finding anything else out of the ordinary, he went back to his truck and drove away. He drove down to the gin, got out, and walked around the place to make sure no one was there. When he went to go get back in the truck, he noticed the handprint on top of his window. Now, anyone who has ever driven a truck down a dirt road will tell you, handprints on vehicles fill with dust and stand out. He saw the print, freaked out, and called me. Right over his head, on the top part of the door and the cab of the truck, was the biggest handprint I've ever seen in my life. I have average hands for my size. It was easily bigger than 2 of my hands. I told him my story. He described the smell nearly the same as I did. Neither of us ever found out what was living down there. I heard a few more stories over my time there. I even ran across one guy who was convinced it was the West Texas version of Bigfoot. I would answer a few suspicious persons calls around the area over the next few years. I always kept an eye out, but never had another encounter like I did that night, though. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoy this content and want to hear more creepy stories like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons or follow the subscription link in the description below. Until next time.